Have you ever walked up to a gorgeous, blossoming cherry tree only to find this thick, sticky goop oozing right out of the bark? Yeah, it's a sight that can instantly send any gardener into full-blown panic mode.
But hey, before you panic, just imagine biting into a perfectly juicy cherry, only to realize that this delightful fruit holds some pretty serious secrets. Secrets that could dramatically level up your gardening skills. We're going to discover exactly why cherry trees produce this gum, and more importantly, how understanding this can completely transform your orchard. The stakes are real here, and the health of your trees relies entirely on you decoding these hidden signals.
Okay, so here's our treatment plan for today's explainer. We're going to unravel the mystery of tree gum, look at the anatomy of the ooze, identify the culprits behind the cankers, figure out how to diagnose your tree's distress, walk through some practical solutions and prevention, and then wrap it all up with our expert takeaways.
All right, part 1. The mystery of tree gum.
So what in the world is actually happening when your beloved cherry tree starts leaking this strange jelly-like substance? Well, the scientific term for this is Gummosis. It's essentially the oozing of a sticky sap from wounds or cankers on your fruit trees. You can really think of this amber-colored liquid as a literal cry for help. It's a non-specific defense reaction to some kind of abiotic or biotic stress. Basically, the tree is frantically trying to create its own liquid bandage to seal off a problem and protect its vascular system from further damage.
Moving on to part 2, anatomy of the ooze.
Now, let's take a look under the bark to see the biology in action. Because this gum doesn't just magically appear out of thin air. It is actually produced right inside the tree's cambium layer. And here is the truly wild part. It's the result of the tree intentionally breaking down its own cell walls, specifically degrading pectin and cellulose. This intense cellular breakdown is driven by hydrolase enzymes. But what actually pulls the trigger? Plant hormones. When under severe stress, hormones like ethylene and jasmonate kickstart this whole biochemical cascade. They literally turn solid plant tissue into a complex carbohydrate gum to defend the xylem and phloem when they're under attack.
Which brings us to part 3, culprits behind the cankers.
So if the tree is frantically deploying this emergency liquid bandage, what exactly is triggering such a drastic immune response? Well, we can break the main stress vectors down into 3 categories. First up, pathogens. These are the opportunists, like the bacteria Pseudomonas syringae, or fungi like Cytospora and Botryosphera. Second, we have pests. A prime example here would be peach tree borers. Their larvae will just tunnel right into the inner bark. And finally, environmental factors. This means frost cracks, sun scald, or mechanical injury. And honestly, that last one is huge. A simple slip with your string trimmer or a bad pruning cut completely breaches the tree's defenses, leaving the front door wide open for those opportunistic pathogens to just march right in.
And that sets the stage for the actual battleground, the canker. When those opportunistic pathogens invade through an open wound, they kill the bark and the underlying wood, which creates these sunken, darker, dead patches. We call those cankers. They often form a hardened, kind of corky edge, and they become the ultimate breeding grounds for the invading bacteria and fungi. It's right from these dark, infected zones that the tree starts leaking all that sap.
Let's dive into part 4, diagnosing the tree's distress.
Knowing how to read your tree's visual cues is absolutely crucial to figuring out just how bad the problem is. So let's play botanical detective for a second. How do you know if it's just a mechanical bump or a lethal infection? Well, non-infectious Gummosis, say from a frost crack or a bump from your lawnmower, will produce a clear to light amber ooze. There's no smell, and if you very carefully check underneath, the tissue is still healthy. Infectious Gummosis, though, that is much more sinister. The ooze will be dark or milky. It often gives off a sour or sweet odor because the sugars are fermenting, and beneath the bark you're going to find dead, cinnamon-brown tissue. That right there is the absolute hallmark of a dangerous bacterial or fungal infection.
But bacterial canker doesn't just stop at the trunk. You really have to watch the rest of the tree too. Keep an eye out for shot-hole brown spots on the leaves. They eventually fall right out, leaving the leaf looking like Swiss cheese, usually accompanied by wilting or yellowing foliage. And pay very close attention in the spring. If blossoms open up but then rapidly collapse, which is a really tragic condition called blossom blast, you have a serious problem. You might also notice the sudden dieback of new shoots and young branches. Spotting these secondary symptoms early on can literally mean the difference between saving a single branch and having to chop down your entire tree.
All right, part 5, practical solutions and prevention. Now let's transition right into our active treatment plan. If you find yourself having to surgically remove a bacterial canker, you need to follow this exact step-by-step method to do it safely. First, prune the diseased branch at least 12 inches below the canker. Why? Because the pathogen is usually hiding inside the wood that still looks perfectly healthy. Second, disinfect your pruning tools with 70% alcohol for at least 30 seconds between every single cut. No exceptions. Third, dispose of the diseased wood in a sealed bag. Never ever throw this in your compost or the disease is just going to spread everywhere. And finally, you can apply a horticultural copper spray to the wound, assuming the bacterial strain in your area hasn't become copper resistant.
But wait, what if the canker is right on the main trunk of a mature tree? I mean, you obviously can't just prune the trunk. Well, here is a delicate surgical procedure you can use to save it. First, spread newspaper around the base of the tree to catch any infected tissue. Then, take a sterilized box cutter or a really sharp knife and cut a circle around the localized wound. You want to carefully scrape out the dead, brown tissue until you finally expose the healthy, pale heartwood underneath. Once you're done, immediately bag up that newspaper and all the shavings, and then spray the wound to prevent any reinfection. You're basically doing literal tree surgery. Of course, the absolute best treatment is preventing the wound in the very first place. Here's how you can upgrade your orchard care routine today to protect your trees. Prune only during dry periods. Think January, February, or late summer. You never want to prune in cool, wet weather when bacteria are highly active and spreading by splashing rain. Also, protect that delicate bark from winter sunscald by using white tree wrap or a 50-50 mix of latex paint and water. And be incredibly careful to prevent mower and string trimmer damage when you're doing your yard work. Finally, maintain optimal watering and fertilization. A vigorously growing tree is going to have a much stronger immune system to fight off any invaders.
Which brings us to part 6, conclusion and expert takeaways. If you take away just one piece of botanical science from this whole explainer, let it be this. Healthy trees naturally slow down pathogen development. By maintaining a high physiological status, meaning giving the tree optimal water, proper nutrients, and ensuring absolutely zero mechanical damage, you directly minimize those ethylene-induced stress reactions that cause Gummosis to begin with. Simply put, a well-maintained, completely stress-free cherry tree is going to be your absolute best defense against severe infections.
Now, just a really quick note to keep in mind here. This explainer is for informational purposes only. Every single orchard environment is unique, and pathogen strains can vary significantly depending on where you live, so you should always consult with a local agricultural professional or your local extension office for specific tree health issues and localized treatment advice.
And that brings us to our final question for you. Will you change your pruning habits and orchard care routine to stop Gummosis before it even starts? Remember, every single cut you make and every single time you run a lawnmower near that trunk, you are directly impacting the health of your tree. Take these newfound botanical insights out into the garden with you this season. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and here is to a healthy, thriving orchard.